In early 2024, neighbors in West Haven, Connecticut, began noticing something difficult to ignore. A little girl they often saw playing outside was suddenly nowhere to be found. Her name was Jacqueline Torres Garcia, a quiet 12-year-old whose small frame and soft smile made her instantly recognizable in the neighborhood. She lived with her mother, older sister, and her mother's ex-boyfriend. People who, from the outside, seemed protective, reserved, and private. But behind closed doors, something was very wrong. As the weeks passed, there were no signs of Mimi. No school attendance, no playtime outdoors, no family updates. Neighbors assumed she'd moved, or relatives had taken her in. Life continued, and silence settled over the home where she once lived. What no one knew was that Mimi was no longer alive. According to prosecutors, the young girl had endured severe neglect inside the home. Investigators believe she became increasingly unwell in her final days, isolated from relatives who could have helped. When she died, those responsible did not call authorities, did not alert the community, and did not report her death. Instead, they chose to hide what had happened. For nearly a year, the truth stayed buried. It wasn't until late 2024, almost 12 months later, that a maintenance worker behind an abandoned building discovered something inside a discarded bag. Authorities were called. Investigators arrived. And suddenly, a mystery that had quietly lingered in the background of a neighborhood was thrust into the national spotlight. The remains found behind that building were soon identified as belonging to a missing 12-year-old girl. Her name was Jacqueline, but everyone called her Mimi. And now, for the first time, the world was about to learn her story. The discovery of Mimi's remains changed everything. When the call came in, officers assumed they were responding to a routine abandoned property report. Instead, they found evidence of something far more disturbing. The scene raised immediate questions. Who placed the bag there? How long had it been there? And most importantly, who was the child inside? Detectives quickly realized this was not a recent disappearance. Clothing, environmental signs, and the condition of the items inside pointed toward a timeline stretching months into the past. This meant whoever was responsible had kept a secret hidden for nearly a year. Within days, forensic specialists worked around the clock. Dental records and DNA analysis confirmed the identity. 12-year-old Jacqueline Mimi Torres Garcia. She hadn't been reported missing. No alerts had been sent out, and no one had asked authorities to look for her. That fact alone stunned investigators. The discovery raised more questions than answers. How does a child vanish from a community without a trace? Why didn't her family notify anyone? How could a young girl be missing for almost a year before anyone realized? As police retraced her steps, they learned that Mimi had slowly slipped out of public view. No school attendance, no medical records, no documented contact with Child Protective Services. That gap in visibility struck investigators as deeply unusual. Detectives soon turned their attention to the people who lived with Mimi. They interviewed neighbors, relatives, and landlords. Patterns emerged. Unexplained move-outs, inconsistent stories, and a family dynamic marked by secrecy. Authorities knew immediately that Mimi's disappearance wasn't accidental. It required intent, planning, and silence. A silence that lasted almost a year. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell. Once Mimi was identified, investigators shifted their focus to the people closest to her. Her mother, her older sister, and her mother's former partner. Interviews grew tense. Stories conflicted. Small inconsistencies began accumulating into larger concerns, and detectives sensed that the truth was hidden somewhere within the household's fractured timeline. Authorities learned that at the time of Mimi's death, the family had moved between homes. Rent was overdue, neighbors were avoided, and explanations about Mimi's whereabouts seemed rehearsed or evasive. People recalled the family mentioning that Mimi was visiting relatives or staying with her father, claims later proven false. Detectives noticed a pattern. Every time someone asked where Mimi was, the story changed. Prosecutors later alleged that in the weeks leading up to her death, Mimi was kept isolated. She wasn't seen outside, and visitors weren't allowed to interact with her. The home had become a closed environment, one where oversight faded and secrecy thrived. As the investigation deepened, officers executed searches, gathering evidence from former residences, digital devices, and communication logs. What they uncovered helped piece together a troubling timeline. Mimi's health had deteriorated significantly before her death, and instead of seeking help, those around her failed to act. When confronted with mounting evidence, the family members gave explanations that detectives found implausible. Some blamed each other, others minimized what had happened, but the forensic timeline kept contradicting their claims. By early 2025, authorities had enough to move forward. Arrests were made, charges were announced, and the community, once unaware a child had vanished in their midst, was suddenly confronted with the heartbreaking truth. The people who should have protected Mimi were now accused of concealing her death. And the case was far from over. The arrest announcements sent shockwaves through Connecticut and across the nation. Prosecutors filed multiple serious charges against 3 individuals connected to Mimi's life: her mother, her older sister, and her mother's former boyfriend. Each faced accusations including involvement in Mimi's death, failing to seek help as her condition declined, and ultimately concealing her remains instead of contacting authorities. These were crimes that prosecutors argued showed not just negligence, but deliberate decisions that deprived Mimi of the protection every child deserves. Court documents revealed a troubling picture, one of missed opportunities, silence, and avoidance. In hearings, prosecutors claimed that the adults responsible chose secrecy over accountability and concealment over honesty. Defense attorneys pushed back, arguing that the story was more complicated, that not all details were clear, and that each person's level of involvement differed. The court quickly became a battleground of competing narratives. But the forensic evidence remained consistent. Mimi had been gone for nearly a year without a single official missing person report. Not one relative contacted police. No family member raised alarm. To prosecutors, that silence spoke volumes. Communities across Connecticut and the nation mourned a child they never knew but felt deeply connected to. Candlelight vigils were held, advocacy groups called for increased child welfare oversight, and many asked a painful question: how can a child be missing for a year without anyone noticing? As the legal process moved forward, authorities emphasized that this case was not about sensational headlines. It was about accountability, prevention, and ensuring no child goes unseen again. For Mimi, justice was now in motion, but justice would require truth, and the truth was still unfolding. In the months following the arrests, the conversation shifted from the details of the crime to the girl at the center of it all, Jacqueline Mimi Torres Garcia. Friends and classmates remembered her as quiet but thoughtful, the kind of child who preferred drawing to group activities, who smiled shyly when spoken to, and who rarely caused trouble. Community members who barely knew her still felt the weight of her loss. Her story became a symbol of overlooked children, of the hidden struggles that sometimes unfold behind closed doors, and of the urgent need for stronger support systems for families in crisis. Advocacy groups used Mimi's case to push for deeper welfare checks, wider community reporting systems, and improved communication between schools and social services. In many ways, Mimi's story sparked a renewed commitment to preventing similar tragedies. For investigators, Mimi's case became one they would never forget, not because of its details, but because of what it revealed about the fragility of childhood safety when oversight fails. As court proceedings continued, one thing remained clear: Mimi deserved to be remembered not for the circumstances of her death, but for her humanity, for the life she lived, however short, for the personality she had, however quiet, and for the hope that her story might lead to change. Today, Mimi's name stands as a reminder that every child deserves to be seen, heard, and protected. And while her story is heartbreaking, it has fueled conversations that may save lives in the future. Justice for Mimi means accountability, but it also means awareness. And awareness begins with telling her story, honestly, respectfully, and with the intention of ensuring that no child ever disappears unnoticed again.